Joe Biden just nominated violent criminal thug Elliot Abrams to diplomacy commission in Washington, D.C. This is absurd. Even that notorious weaselly Biden bro, Mehdi Hassan, is upset about this. He's still going to tell you to vote for Joe Biden, though. Elliot Abrams is an unelected swamp monster that we can't get rid of. Elliot Abrams worked under Ronald Reagan, where he waged an insane genocidal campaign against socialists in Central America, including backing fascists who was killing and executing Marxists in El Salvador, including all their family, their friends, women, and children. During Ronald Reagan's brutal proxy war, the fascists that he was supporting committed a massacre in El Mozote. Here is Elliot Abrams lying on behalf of the Ronald Reagan administration in order to cover for those heinous crimes. This is another example of Joe Biden being just like Donald Trump. Donald Trump hired Elliot Abrams to be a special envoy in Venezuela, where the Donald Trump administration tried to overthrow their government. Elliot Abrams was also hired by Trump to be the envoy to Iran, where they pulled out an Iran deal and continue to escalate tensions with them. Joe Biden put this guy on a diplomacy commission. Notice how both parties, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, love this violent criminal thug, Elliot Abrams. Hey, Donald Trump, whatever happened to drain the swamp?
What's poppin', my friends, my family? It's great to be back. Welcome back to Nick at Night. I apologize for not making it last week, but I don't think you guys complain. We had Dr. Cornell West on last Wednesday, so that's why I couldn't make time to prepare a Nick at Night. You guys know I gotta put a banger show on for you guys, and that was the video I made on Hotspot. You guys see that Nico made those videos as well. A big shout out to Nico and Hotspot. There's new media companies who I want to give a shout out to, because they gave me tips. They helped me put these videos together. And Hotspot is a new company that let's see, what the fuck is it?
Joe Biden just not.
They're a new company that's trying to give voice to actual powerful leftists out here. So give Hotspot a follow, my friends. I got a link in the description. Big shout out to Nico House the GOAT, because I like that new format. The time limit after having 2-3 hour ranting streams actually forces me to be more concise. And I think a 90-second limit, I can squeeze a lot of information in, a lot of hard-hitting facts that's hard to deny, right? Good luck defending Joe Biden after watching that video, right? Because you can't defend it. Hiring a violent criminal thug like Elliot Abrams. And you guys know why I call him that. Because whenever the working class commit petty crimes, the media is out. Fucking thug, violent criminal. And I proposed this in our show. I think was it with Due Dissidence? I think we'll do Dissonance. Where you guys know how they say RFK, the anti-vaxxer. No matter what the story's about. The story can be about literally anything. It could be about climate change. It could be about healthcare. It could be about his bad stance on Israel-Palestine. But they'll lead the article with RFK Jr., the anti-vaxxer. Whenever people talk about Jimmy Dore, they lead with Jimmy Dore, the anti-vaxxer. So I propose that we imitate the way they speak about their enemies, right? So when I talk about the ruling class, we should call him, and I like this article here, when they say Biden nominates Death Squad backer. That's his title. That should be his title. So when we refer to members of the ruling class, why don't we do that? Right? Some people like Elon Musk. I'm like, Elon Musk, the union breaker. The union buster Elon Musk. The union buster Jim Crow Joe. The war criminal Jim Crow Joe. The police state building war criminal Jim Crow Joe. You You can go all day with these titles. What's popping, Andrew? We got my boy in the house. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready. There we go. I'm gonna introduce my dad. I got a lot to talk about that. I'm sure Andrew got a lot to say. Jim Crow Joe does it again. Have Elliot Abrams to diplomacy panel, and based on that short, you guys see how ridiculous that is. What's popping? I got my great friend. I met Andrew down in Seattle. You guys see him on the show a few times. A great leftist intellectual and activist. Welcome to RB, my friend.
Thanks for having me on, Nick. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you great, man. Thank you for joining me.
Cool.
Feel free to just chime in or interrupt anytime because I'm explaining to, and I implore people of the proletariat, especially post-duopoly leftists, right? Anyone who post-duopoly, call these people by the same titles they call us.
Yeah.
So you already see anyone who's demonized by the media, conspiracy theorists, RFK Jr.
Yeah.
Anti-vaxxer Jimmy Dore. So I'm like Jim Crow Joe, fucking police state Kamala. But go ahead, Andrew, if you have any reactions.
No, I think it's a good tack to take always. If you can control the language that's acceptable for people to use, you are controlling the thoughts that people are allowed to have who have not yet learned about these issues and learned the history of someone like Elliot Abrams backing the Contras, which are nothing more than mercenary fascist death squads. So I agree. And I put in the chat a second ago, I said Elon Musk, the Bolivian coup plotting colonizer. Because
that's a good one.
And we can't get way too caught up in always being in a space of propaganda and media. It's very important, but when we're there, we have to be setting our own linguistic boundaries that are truthful and to push back on that. So I think you're taking exactly the right approach to, how do you even deal with just first of all this title and Elliot Abrams being taken from Reagan to Trump's administration to Biden's administration. We'll call him what he is.
He's a violent criminal thug. That's what they show. That's what they always refer to our people as, right? There would be a white family. There would be a husband who would shoot and kill his family. They would show a family picture of him smiling. A black kid, he's still Skittles, and they were like, "Look at this thug criminal." So if you disagree with me and you want to call working class people who may make mistakes, criminals and thugs, who's the biggest criminal and thug there is? You would think it's someone like Elliot Abrams. Jim Crow Joe is the Don. The biggest criminal there is made up of the ruling class. Is accepted by the ruling class. When you look at the body count of this guy, whenever I talk about the video, you mentioned this as well. He played a very significant role when it comes to lying to the media in El Salvador. As I mentioned in this video, you would have Marxist revolutionaries. There was a lot of Marxist freedom fighters and guerrillas, to be frank, that was waging a revolution against their country that had massive popular support. So one of the ways that the fascist government quelled this uprising and was obviously in a very violent way, because they was ran by fascist people who was 100% down selling out the people to the West, and they coordinated with the Ronald Reagan administration when they was waging a proxy war, and Ronald Reagan worked with the media in the United States to set this narrative that the violent fascists was the good guys. And they was actually they were trying to resolve the conflicts peacefully, but even though the Marxist guerrillas was making things complicated because they keep engaging in violence, but even though the narrative was completely different, and this was shown multiple times when you had independent journalists that would travel to El Salvador, they're like, no, you had the government that is executing not only just the protesters, the Marxist guerrillas, they was executing their family, their friends, anyone who has sympathy towards the revolution was executed violently by the government. And there was a massacre in El Mozote that resulted in hundreds of unarmed civilians being massacred by the fascist government. And this narrative completely, the narrative that the Reagan administration was completely false. And it was shown based on what's going on the ground, where they was pretending they was backing the good guys, because Reagan wanted to wage a proxy war in Central America. Now, what does this sound like? Isn't this funny how history repeats itself? Because you have the Biden administration and the Western regime backing Zelensky and the violent fascist thugs in Ukraine. And you have a media complex that's trying to erase their crimes. And that's the same thing that happened. Same thing would happen. And guess who was there? Who gave a testimony? Elliot Abrams said that he was like, I was down there at El Mozote. Yeah, I did. I looked at the evidence, and based on the evidence, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. That's what he said.
You can think of him as, I guess, analogous to Ron DeSantis or Colin Powell. This is literally, but all three of these men's jobs is to lie to the public, to cover up for the most barbaric war crimes, crimes against humanity that the U.S. commits on a regular basis. Colin Powell covered up the My Lai massacre. Ron DeSantis covered up torture in Iraq and Guantanamo Bay. And Elliot Abrams, these people are recycled. And like you said, you could repeat that as many times as you have breath for in a year if you're telling people that you need to know history or you'll be doomed to repeat the same mistakes. I mean, it's literally the same people even. We haven't even gone far enough for Elliot Abrams to die and someone else to replace him for this job. People's lack of historical context is really crushing in the U.S.
Elliot Abrams, and we're going to cover this later, he was in multiple administrations. He was just in Donald Trump's administration. And that's why I laugh at Trump and their supporters who continue to spread this myth that he was any sort of anti-establishment fighter. He hired Elliot Abrams as Iran and Venezuela envoy. But we get to that very soon. I want to show you guys what he did in one of the many ways he complicit with genocide. He waged many campaigns to overthrow democracy in Central America and South America under his time under Ronald Reagan. So I'm gonna read this part here. I want to see what's a good starting point. I'll start from here. In January 1982, just as the Reagan administration was preparing to make its very first certification, the White House found itself faced with reports of a massacre in the village of El Mozote in a tiny guerrilla-friendly canton, Morazan. And then they went, and you had New York Times and Washington Post that reported on the incident where hundreds of unarmed civilians have been murdered by the Salvadorian soldiers. So the journalists literally said they didn't see the massacre, but they saw the corpses firsthand. So now this is when it gets interesting. You see how evil the United States really is. And they don't really care. They knowingly back in the wrong side here. The same thing with Ukraine. So instead of seeing this massacre like, holy shit, man, we need to change course. We have to care about human rights. The administration and its allies went to war with the reporters and their publications to try to prevent the story from mucking up their proxy war. What does this sound like? Isn't it hilarious how history mirrors current and present day? If you don't know, if you don't know the pattern of evil that our empire wages, you get caught in this cycle. You don't know what the fuck is going on. When you see what the Biden doing in Ukraine, I immediately saw what they was doing. I immediately saw the proxy war machine starting up again. And this is Ronald Reagan, who was desperate to wage a proxy war in El Salvador to counter communism, socialism, and the influence of the Soviet Union. Now you have the same situation in Ukraine where the West want to counter and weaken Russia, span the influence of NATO, and waging a proxy war in Ukraine and threatening everyone in the media who dare report the truth. There was a story about the Nazi in Ukraine, the New York Times having to admit that many people in media don't even want to talk about the obvious fact that the U.S. government is funding Nazi Ukraine. There are many pictures and photos of them, and many of them don't want to say that because they don't want to be labeled a Putin sympathizer. They want to be demonized by the government and by the media cronies, and that was exactly what happened in this situation here. So I want to get to his quote. Here it is. I'm gonna scroll down because they explain how the Reagan administration tried to spread propaganda. They try to plant stories to journalists. But here's Elliot Abrams, baby-faced Elliot Abrams, only 1 year older than I am at this point in his life. 33 years old, up-and-coming neocon. Was Reagan's assistant secretary of State for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs. Unbelievable. He was Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs. Also took up the cause. And this is what he said. He said, El Mozote is a very interesting one in a sense. The El Mozote case is a very interesting one in a sense. Because we found, for example, that the numbers, first of all, were not credible. Because as the Secretary Anders notes, our information was that there are only 300 people in the canton. And Abrams' argument was deliberately misleading. News report has been clear that mass killing has taken place in several hamlets. So he was like, there's a hamlet that got 300 people. And they're like, no, they killed all the people. What the fuck are you talking about? But he knows, but his job is to lie on behalf of war criminals and genocidal thugs that the United States is arming, that we're still doing to this day. What we're still doing to this day. And you have Donald Trump, who this criminal, this thug, Elliot Abrams, who lied under the Ronald Reagan administration. Trump, who said he was going to drain the swamp, brings him on as the Iran envoy. And you guys know the Trump administration implemented a tough stance on Iran, pulled out of the Iran deal. And now Joe Biden doubled down on those policies as well. And then they hiring the same guy from Iran. And then you had the Trump administration that hired this guy as the special envoy to Venezuela, where Donald Trump personally wanted to launch an invasion, which is why it's absurd that people pretend that he's anti-war. You had the Trump administration brag about the economic devastation brought upon by sanctions and actively team up with Bolsonaro and launch military operations in the state of Venezuela. But this guy was hired by Joe Biden for diplomacy. Is there anything you want to add real quick, Andrew?
Yeah, for anybody who might still want to, cape for Donald Trump and apologize for his, really terrible record in his first term, that wasn't just a random accident that he put Elliot Abrams as a diplomatic figure in contact with Iran and Venezuela. Iran would be very familiar with how the U.S. was using people, literally the same people, including Elliot Abrams, to intervene in their affairs and to, spread weapons around that region of the Middle East in that same period that Elliot Abrams was caping for Iran-Contra and covering that up and covering up the massacres that our proxy forces were committing in Latin America. We were using that conflict. We were spinning momentum off of our conflicts we were managing in Latin America and using that to interfere with Iran. And similarly, Venezuela absolutely understands what Elliot Abrams was doing in Latin America. And Trump couldn't do that on accident in any scenario. He knew exactly who Elliot Abrams was. He was probably being advised of what a menacing message this would be by his other, military and State Department advisors that Trump picked for his cabinet. He picked only swamp dwellers. And he picked, in this case, the perfect one if you wanted to send the most destructive and menacing message to these other countries, and you didn't care. You wanted to let them know you don't care at all about international law. You don't make any apologies for the violence that our country did versus these specific regions in the 80s. So here's your old friend Elliot Abrams again. You have to sit down with him and make nice with him in diplomatic meetings.
If you are one of those idiots that believe that Trump is an anti-establishment fighter, I'm asking you, who's the crazy radical hire? Where are they? Where's the person that said, I want to end the military industrial complex, I want to take on Wall Street, and he was banned from jobs, and Trump was like, I'm going to take a risk on this crazy renegade. It doesn't exist. You got Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, Steve Mnuchin, Steve Bannon from Goldman Sachs, Nikki Haley, who's appointed to the UN under Trump. Can we emphasize John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and Steve Mnuchin? And people still think he was some guy who, he just trying his best. He just couldn't get it done. Well, what kind of stupid shit is that? Who believes that? And that's why I have funk with, and I debated MAGA communists over that, because that's an absurd take to believe this guy was anti-establishment. And this is the receipt I was talking about earlier. Trump blasted for naming war criminal, Iran-Contra convict, that criminal thug, Elliot Abrams, as Iran envoy. He drained the swamp, though, according to MAGA. And you guys know that Joe Biden likes him, too. I thought Joe Biden and Democrats, I thought you guys was against MAGA communism. MAGA Republicans. I thought you guys were against MAGA Republicans. That's what Joe Biden always says. We got to fight against MAGA Republicans. Who's the biggest MAGA Republican you think of? It's someone like Elliot Abrams, who designed MAGA foreign policy, who was given jobs by the MAGA administration, who has the ideology of MAGA. So you guys are fighting MAGA Republicans, where you guys giving Trump appointees jobs. You guys see how it's really a Uni-party? And I always have to emphasize this, because you guys notice in the comments every once in a while, you see right wingers who click on the video because we shit on Democrats. Your side is just as bad. They on the same side. Trump was friends with the Clintons. He was friends with Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough. He's part of the club. You are not. And that's why hires like these is one of the things that exposes the two-party system more than anything. Because if you're Donald Trump, you have one bad hire, and you're telling you want to talk about draining the swamp, you have one bad hire, okay. Over and over again. Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, Steve Mnuchin, Steve Bannon, Nikki Haley. And God knows who else I'm forgetting. Stephen Miller. God knows, there's so many swamp monsters there. If it's not just one mistake. And no matter what happens, really, it's going to be good narrative-wise whether Biden or Trump wins. Because I can't wait to laugh at Trump supporters again if Trump wins, and he's going to sell them out again. And I'm going to laugh at the people who still bootlick them the same way I laugh at them now, the same way I laugh at the people who still bootlick obvious frauds like Bernie and Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. If you're part of the Uni-party, we are post-duopoly leftists, you're a clown, right? And I'll just read the subheadline here. Elliot Abrams has made a career of lying and committing criminal acts that have led to the death and suffering of innocent people from Guatemala to Iraq. Man, so many states that he's fucked up. Hard to get to them all in a segment, right? So you had people like Mediasana called Biden out for this because it's so obviously bad, but they're still gonna vote for him. They're still gonna, at what point do we start shaming people for voting for someone who appoints Elliot Abrams? And what you say, Nick, come on, what are you talking about? You can't do that. That's mean. Andrew, imagine the shit I would get if I was like, yeah, I'm voting for Donald Trump. Bro, I would get right through the cold, son, if I was a Trump voter on the left, right? They're like, oh my God, you're enabling the right-wing fascists. Which would be kind of true, right? But people vote for Joe Biden, who does all the things that Donald Trump did. Hire the same fucking person Donald Trump did. Double down on his Iran policy. Double down on his Israel policy. Double down on his policy on Venezuela. All these escalated the military-industrial complex. Funded ICE more. Funding the police more. People vote for Joe Biden. That's okay. That's okay. Come on, man. What can you do? Now, if I vote for Trump, will the same attitude be shown to me?
No, there's no, the scales that are used are weighted differently. And in the case of somebody like Biden or Trump, depending on who's actually evaluating their behavior, they don't weigh their actions at all. It's all vibes. It's all entirely made up perceptions and, Hercules Disney movie type motivations that people put in the minds of the politicians that they really want to attach themselves to.
Yeah, we just want consistency, and no more of the weak post-duopoly movement. where you guys like, yeah, we Greens voters, but it's all right if you vote Biden. No more of that. Are we gonna do we actually care about building this movement or not? At what point do we draw the line and saying, like, are you either helping us build a third party mutual aid movement or you're not part of the team? And I don't view the people like Crystal Ball and many other people who said stuff like this, like, yeah, it would be great if we had a third party in America. It would be great, but we're not there yet. So what are they waiting for? They're waiting for us to build it. Then they're going to jump out and be like, oh, yeah, I want to be on the team now. We're winning. None of that. So I'm going to show you guys this clip. This is Elliot Abrams being called out by a friend of the show, Dan Cohen. We had him on multiple times. This is a fantastic clip. And he put the description here. Convicted criminal Elliot Abrams' appointment to Biden's State Department makes me think back to when he threatened me in the streets of Washington, D.C. for asking difficult questions. We are ruled by unrepentant sociopaths. So this is the older clip. So let's pull it up because this is the kind of pressure that Elliot Abrams should be facing all the time in the streets, because in our system, criminals like him of his magnitude are not punished. He's above the law. So
we're skeptical about you because of your history of using humanitarian aid to send weapons to Contras in Central America. Do you have any comments about that? There are a lot of people who are very skeptical.
No. Could you leave us alone, please?
I'm doing my job. You are too.
I'm actually walking, so I would appreciate it.
What do you have to say about that?
What do you walking have to do with anything? So is there like some rule that if you walk in, people's First Amendment rights don't apply? You guys see the disdain that Western authoritarians have towards the free press? And why I roll my eyes whenever people talk about Western values, Western democracy. Everything is a fraud. These are the leaders of our society, have been for decades. He's been in multiple presidential administrations, and he had complete disdain for the press. The same disdain he's seen during the 80s, during the Iran-Contra. Let's continue.
You have to say about your criminal convictions for lying to Congress.
Well,
Mr. Abrams, the people want to know. The people want to know why you see yourself as qualified for this. You lied to Congress. You're convicted of crimes. Mr. Abrams, the people want to know, why did you lie to Congress? You were pardoned by President Bush. Will you apologize to the American people for lying?
you're going to need to leave us alone, or we will actually have to have a speech.
We're both in public. That's
no,
what you're gonna.
Sorry.
You're gonna wait. What are you gonna do? You're gonna have what done? Elliot Abrams apparently just threatened me if I don't stop walking next to him on this sidewalk.
You see how much they hate these freedoms and democracy that they claim they hold dear? And this is something that's critically important for me and us, the people who claim they are Marxists, to do, because Marxism is a science, which is essentially a critique of capitalism and Western democracy. And the reason why people aren't at our position, the reason why people cling on to Western culture and Western democracy and pretend it's better than the others, they pretend Western democracy better than the savages in Africa, better than the savages in Brazil. You guys know that Western chauvinism? Better than the savages in the Middle East. No, it's not. And there are many ways we can explain and break this down. This country is not founded on these freedoms and free press that you guys think they are. That's why we arrest journalists. That's why we support states that arrest journalists like Ukraine. That's why the elites in our culture have disdain toward journalists like Dan Cohen. Look at the disdain they had towards the Gray Zone and many other independent journalists who call them out. Because at the end of the day, they have disdain towards the freedom of the press. In the West, not the communist states that they criticize, are deeply authoritarian. And we're going to get to more examples of this because we in near the end of the story. But I'm going to show you the authoritarian impulses, as they call it, that come from France and Emmanuel Macron threatening social media censorship, and Joe Biden being straight up called out for Supreme Court censorship. So I know, I think CJ covered that a little bit, so we quickly brush over that. Andrew, any last thoughts on this story before we move on? And this is the theme of the show. We're going to expose Western hypocrisy and how they are the quote unquote authoritarian states.
Yeah. Just the last thing I would say is, one of the things I really appreciate that RBN always does is go back to learn what we can from, ongoing, current, and historical people's movements, especially of people who have been fighting, front line against colonialism. And there's a great documentary that you can watch on YouTube for free called In the Name of the People. And it was a few American journalists who stayed with and filmed with the FMLN, the Revolutionary Forces in El Salvador, in the mid 80s. And so you get to see about their politics and their tactics and how they are interfacing not only just with people who already say that they have a prepackaged political ideology, but they were going and working with people with no political power at all and working with, peasants and indigenous peoples, and building this very effective movement. And so I would highly recommend people watch that documentary. It doesn't take too long. There's good subtitles, so you don't need to know Spanish or anything. But that's all I'd really add is, go and learn about the people that Elliot Abrams was helping to murder in the 80s. And you'll find multiple useful things in there.
So, In the Name of the People, El Salvador Civil War. We can't play it, and you highly recommend it. And I definitely got it. I definitely got to save it and make sure I check it out. So make sure you guys watch this great documentary on the Civil War. I definitely trusted Andrew vouched for it. We have a few more things we're going to cover. Great comments. I'll read a few of them. America keeping colonialism alive as well for the WEF, World Economic Forum. Absolutely. That's great work by Dan Cohen, and they threatened he threatened prison because he had the audacity to ask some questions in public. Like, that's like, will you do that? Like, I want to be like, I'm gonna fucking get the cops on you. How dare you talk to me? That level of elitism that these people have. Wealthy people don't go to prison; they pay a fine, and it's business as usual. That will cover with Home Depot. 0.06% of 1% of the money they made paid a wage step fine. So that's the question we ask. Are these laws real for rich people if they can easily afford it? And some smart pants guy, someone smarter than me, he did the numbers in the comments. I saw it was a great comment where he like, if you made like $40,000 a year and you got fined what Home Depot did for their wage step practices, then you could be fined $16. Like you were like, bro, that shit who gives a fuck if I get caught for that? That's what they do. They mark on their books. And that's an example how the wealthy is above the law here. And that's why you got the wealthy that praise our system, America, the greatest country of all time, because they're above the law, while we get subjugated to a harsh authoritarian police state, right? And I want to be clear, because I use these terms for simplicity. But before I get to the story, and I'll break this down, I want to explain this again. Authoritarianism is nothing but a propaganda term. Like, you guys know that, right? Like, and I explained this when I was on the Hill, and my one and only appearance. You ever gonna see me on the fucking Hill? Because they wanted to bring me on to talk about Venezuela, and they were talking about authoritarianism. I'm like, you mean it's a country enforcing their laws? Nicolas Maduro was an authoritarian because he charged people for attempting to assassinate him and violently overthrow the government. You know the same thing that Democrats do to January 6th protesters? So when you have laws, you have to implement them. And then you have the social democrats. You have the suitable left that the CIA love, right? They say, I am a social democrat because they believe in capitalist propaganda. Why do you guys say you're a social democrat? Why do you guys say you're a democratic socialist? What kind of socialist is authoritarian? Do you believe in the dictatorship of the proletariat or not? Do you believe in seizing the means of production or not? What do you mean democratic socialism? Fuck you talking about it. Socialism is inherently democratic. So when you say democratic socialism, those are the people who fall for capitalist propaganda that believe that socialist states are inherently authoritarian. So they said, we want to do something that's never been done before, and we're going to have a good version of a socialism. They're not really dictatorship approach. They're not really seizing the means of production. We just want $15 minimum wage. Right? Now we don't actually want to see the British. That's social democracy. They stop short because they fall for the authoritarian nonsense. So I have a question for the people that listen who like, man, I'm a social democrat. Then what are you talking about? I'm not for all that crazy Soviet Union use of your actual laws and mandate given to you by the people. I have a question for these people. Let's say you voted your way to success, the way you guys wanted. Let's say you got Medicare for All implemented, signed by some president that you guys got elected somehow. What happens? Because if you look at the Bernie Sanders bill, Bernie Sanders has a progressive tax rate where if you make under $35,000 a year, you don't have to pay any into the Medicare for All pool. But if you make more money, you got to pay more in taxes. So if you making $1 million a year, you got to pay a lot into the Medicare for All pool. What happens in your quote unquote non-authoritarian democratic society when the rich people say we're not going to pay this tax? In order to fund your Medicare for All program, we're not going to fucking do it. Imagine you pass an UBI, I mean. You got universal basic income that's progressive, that charges and taxes the rich more than the proletariat. What if the rich say no? Oh, now we asking an interesting question now, huh? So you have your quote unquote democratic socialism, the rich say no. What do? You do what they did in Cuba. You do what they did in the Soviet Union. You criminalize the people who are breaking the laws the same way the United States will punish your ass if you don't pay the IRS. You guys see what I'm talking about? So under your guys' society, once they don't pay for Medicare for All, we can't do anything to them because that would be authoritarianism. That's why I mentioned on the Hill, you either got laws or you don't. What makes it not this scary authoritarianism that you guys created is the fact that the mandate came from the people. What does the mandate for our laws come from? It comes from corporations and the oligarchs and the ruling class. Then they use force to enforce their authoritarian capitalist hellhole's landscape that is artificial. But that's not authoritarian, according to democratic socialism. You guys see when you actually get into weaves. You guys see how the ideology start to fall apart. But anyway, I'm lecturing too much. I made dedicated stream to it, some more educated marks. I'm still learning. I still got a lot to learn. It's a very complicated science. But you guys see, once you get past the surface, you start asking questions like, why aren't you coming all the way over here? I remember having Rome on a long time ago. Because I was a social democrat. I'm more of a guy like, yeah, I'm more of a socialist. I don't know that much about communism. And that wasn't because I was propaganda. I don't know. I'm not sure what the system entails, what the science entails. But unlike a lot of liberals, I'm like, I want to have people to my left on. So Rome, communist ass motherfuckers, with communist flags all over his profile. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna talk to that guy. Like, Rome, what's up? And Rome asked me a serious question. He was like, on one of my first shows, he was like, why aren't you a communist? And I was like, I don't know, good question. Convince me. And I think that's the open mind. I think people need to learn and grow. And you learn the science, you realize that there's certain ways that you hold back, right? And that's why the CIA want the social democrat. They want the people that think that our system is not authoritarian. They want the Bernie Sanders that gonna endorse the great friend Jim Crow Joe. You endorse Jim Crow Joe, but they call Nicolas Maduro a tyrant. Why? Because Nicolas Maduro enforces laws. But Andrew, I know you want to chime in. I've been ranting. I apologize, but go ahead, Andrew.
No, you're good. Just to piggyback in, every time nowadays, now that I've learned the history of World War I a little better every year, every time I hear of the Social Democrats, I feel like I have to bring this up. The Social Democratic Party in Germany predates the existence of the term communism as a political party or a political identifier for oneself. There were splits in the Social Democratic Party in Germany and in Russia in the lead up to and during World War I, where the people who ultimately became the communist parties were saying, we should not be supporting the war effort of our own country. They're going to send working class people to fight and die against working class people to move the boundaries around on the map for these different empires. And we want no part in that. And in Germany, the Social Democratic Party in Germany was enormous. They were one of the largest parties in the entire German parliamentary system. But the people who were better off this is where you see class differences shining out as a very important thing to pay attention to. The people who were very well off, who really had controlled the party for a while and tried to push it further away from Marxism, which at that time was their core. During the German Revolution, which came right after the Russian Revolution, you had all of the sailors firing on their commanding officers who had told them to continue to fight the war to preserve the eastern portion of the German Empire. They en masse revolted and mutinied and ended the war, and they formed soldiers and workers' councils that ran Germany for almost all of 1919 and early 1920. Well, what did the Social Democratic Party do? The people that didn't want to stop the war and join the new communist parties, they worked under the table with the old emperors, the Kaisers, and the Kaiser's old military staff, Hindenburg, and they helped to create and direct the Freikorps. The Freikorps was a Contra-style early fascist paramilitary that ultimately became the Nazis. You know, the Hitler spoke very highly of the Freikorps. They were using the swastika in the way that the Nazis used it at that time, and they were used to hunt down and murder people like Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht and the other, really critical organizers and newspaper writers who were helping to try to steer the workers' councils away from people like the really wealthy labor aristocracy people who were running the Social Democratic Party. They literally created the Nazis to stop communism. And nowadays, the SDP is in government right now in Germany. They're still around doing shit. They're the coalition with the Green Party and others who are running Germany right now and sending Leopard tanks to go and attack Russia rather than making peace with their neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic contribution. There's so much to learn, man. I tell you guys, there's so much lessons to learn. And whenever I study history and whenever I learn more stuff, it just reinforces the power of class dynamics in politics and why that rules everything. Why and it reinforces why that's so important. And kind of why I have my attitude and I roll my eyes at people who focus mostly on nonsense, culture war bullshit, like bullshit that had nothing to do with that. Meanwhile, I won't get back to the story because we don't have a ton of time tonight. What's popping, my friend? A big shout out to my friend Didi as well. Shout out as many chats as I can. It's just me producing tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoying. Please like, share, subscribe if you're enjoying the show. Great to be back at Nick and Night. I think that our next Dr. Cornel West interview is 3 weeks from now as well. And we have the Labor and Organizing Summit at the end of the month and the beginning of August as well. I think Joe Stein and Shama Sawan is also joining us in the next few days. So stay tuned for that announcement. So we got a lot of great stuff to come on. But I want to get back to the story and I wanted to go on that spill because I wanted to get into a little education there in terms of I mostly say quote unquote authoritarianism, because I want you guys to know that's mostly a propaganda term. It's what's most important is where the mandate comes from, right? Where the mandate come from, and what socialists and what communists and Marxists are advocating for is a dictatorship of the proletariat, where the mandate always comes from the people. And the science behind Marxism and the science behind socialism is take advantage of human nature, right? So capitalism takes advantage of the worst aspects of human nature, greed, and how power can accumulate and how power can make people psychotic. And they like, we're going to get the people who have, we're going to make the most psychotic people who had the most power hungry or the most greedy, they're going to be top of our society. How does that make sense? How has that worked out? Not great. The idea behind socialism and Marxism, if you get the power to the dictatorship of the proletariat, what the people want, they will look after themselves and their family. So if everyone looked out for them and themselves and their family, what would they advocate for? They would advocate stuff like healthcare. They advocate for stuff like housing. We want great payment. We want actual payment for our labor. We want our neighbor to be taken care from. So yes, it's a system that you guys may call authoritarian because we want to implement our laws, but it's a system that takes advantage of the best of humanity, where the workers have a say, where we have the means of production. Meanwhile, I keep fucking ranting. This is the story because I'm going to use their term. When I use authoritarianism, I'm going to use it the way they use it. Because as you guys see, I have a fundamental disagreement with how they use it. But for simplicity, yes, let's use their term authoritarianism, right? Which I'm assuming. You know what's funny? You can't, if you ask these people who use this term authoritarianism, like liberals and conservatives do, ask them to define it. I have done it many times. They can't do it. So I can. Like, if you, I think the way they define authoritarianism is unchecked, mean government power, I guess. And I'm legitimately asking, what's your guys' definition of it? Because if you're wealthy and you don't want to pay that tax for Medicare for all, and the government forces you to, that seems authoritarian based on their perspective, correct? There'll always be an authoritarian perspective, but where does authority come from? How many YouTube channels have these conversations, guys? How many people actually explain this? You have every other left YouTube channel. They just lazily go along with it. So I'm at least use it in the way that you guys understand, but I'm explaining it, though. So Macron accused authoritarianism, which was very interesting. Because imagine if quote-unquote authoritarian countries did what Emmanuel Macron is doing now. Cutting social media in the midst of an uprising and massive protest. Imagine if Iran did that. Imagine if Venezuela did that. Imagine if Russia, China, aren't these countries considered authoritarian? Right? So now they call Macron authoritarian for that. Wait. So Emmanuel Macron is authoritarian for cutting off social media. What do you call someone that is using their government power to censor people on social media? What do you call a government that is currently torturing and imprisoning an Australian journalist for doing because they engage in journalism? I'm talking about Julian Assange here, who many Americans apparently don't know is not fucking American. They just yeeted someone. They grabbed someone for Australia. I don't know. I forgot exactly where Julian Assange was when he was arrested, to be fair. But he's an Australian citizen. They arrested him. Is that not authoritarianism? Are you guys voting for an authoritarian Joe Biden? Trump supporters, are you voting for authoritarian Donald Trump? Why? So once again, I agree based on their definition that Emmanuel Macron is an authoritarian, but isn't it your boy too? So I guess I actually started doing reading. You guys, I guess Nick and Nike just be me lecturing. How you guys feel about that? I haven't do that much reading, but you guys don't care about that. Here's the headline: Emmanuel Macron accrues authoritarianism after threat to cut off social media. Emmanuel Macron is facing a backlash after threatening to cut off social media networks as a means of stopping the spread of violence during periods of unrest. So this is why I roll my eyes at people who fall for talking points against Iran, Russia, and China. When you see the footage from France and their police violently and brutally attempting to squash this unrest, they can't because there's so many people. But the police units they have in the territory they do have control of have been absolutely brutal in the treatment of the French people. Been absolutely brutal. So if you've seen this in quote unquote communist and socialist countries, what would you call that? That's what I thought there was. But here we see it in France. And this is the theme of this show, the rise of authoritarianism in the West. It's not just France. It's not just France. We've seen the increased authoritarian, using their definition, attitudes spread in the West and United States that have been spreading my entire life. You remember the Patriot Act? With Joe Biden helped write, allegedly. And you had Jim Crow Joe pushing the crime bill. And now you have this lawsuit, and this in the court that prove, and they use the language, and CJ covered this a little bit earlier, that we've been saying regarding the coordination between social media sites and Joe Biden and the Biden administration, and them coordinating with corporations to censor dissent. And people completely lost their fucking mind among the COVIDian left When they were like, oh, it's okay for the government to coordinate with social media to censor people regarding federal government policy. And that when I was like, hold up, wait a second, something ain't right. At what point are we supposed to be okay with that? Which leads to this very interesting case, which shows the authoritarianism, once again, using our definition, of Joe Biden. The judge in Missouri, my home state, versus Biden lawsuit dropped a bombshell of a document to add support to the preliminary injunction. Lots of government defendants. Here are 25 instances where the White House tried to censor Americans in collusion with social media companies. And once again, I do not use the term fascist lightly. But you got the merging of corporation and state, where corporations take directions from the government, very powerful institutions that control public discourse and dialogue. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a very long thread, but I'll just read literally just a few here. And I'll pass to you, Andrew, if you want to chime in on anything here. On January 23rd, 2021, the digital director for the COVID-19 response team contacted Twitter to remove an anti-vaccine tweet by RFK Jr. Now RFK Jr. is challenging Joe Biden. And RFK Jr. is getting interviews pulled from YouTube. You guys see the court? Yeah, I really wish we had YouTube files. You guys see what's going on with our suppression, right? I'll read just a few more. On February 2021, ex-deputy assistant to the president urged Twitter to suspend a parody account associated with President Biden's granddaughter. Now, this is a very interesting case because Glenn Greenwald was talking about. I actually don't have to say. I wonder if I can find it. But if you think that Joe Biden is better character, despite all his crimes, they have a daughter there's a granddaughter that the Biden administration wants nothing to do with, and apparently there was a parody account of this granddaughter because apparently she's like some bastard child. Right, of Hunter Biden, and the Biden administration instructed their administration and the media to never bring that up. Then we'll see if I can find that tweet from Glenn Greenwald, because he actually did a great breakdown of it. But I think that's what they're referring to. Let me see if I can find it. Anyway, I'll continue. I may find it a little bit later. And then here's another one. On February 2021, Twitter suggested a faster method for flagging inappropriate content. The platform was reportedly overwhelmed with a censorship request from the White House, receiving inquiries from 4 different people within the administration in a single day. So there's not like small instances of this. And not like they're using this power sparingly, which many people that defend the Biden administration I've seen, they would say that. They say, oh, the Twitter files is a nothing burger. Yeah, you found a few examples of the Biden administration making polite requests. No. As we got seen here, and God knows how many requests they made. And many people will say, and I think it's accurate to say as well, that the Trump administration made the same request as well. But anything you want to ask, Andrew? I want to get in here real quick before we move on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you can get a lot through Freedom of Information Act requests, and that top 50 organizations in the anti-disinformation industry, that article that Matt Taibbi and some collaborators wrote and put on his Substack, that gives you more or less all the tools you would need if someone wanted to file a FOIA request, but pertaining to YouTube. YouTube's not going to open up their books, but you have the names and general identifying information of now 50 of the most prevalent private industries, private institutions, think tanks, and whatever other toolkits. These organizations that are calling everybody Russian who doesn't agree with the state narrative and having Twitter and them and the other social media companies censor them. But you could use that as the backbone of the language to design your request for FOIA documents and get that. And another thing that Matt mentioned is that Another defense that the government would use, and people who like to just defend Democrats at all costs or defend Republicans at all costs, they'll say, oh, well, these are all private companies. They can do whatever they want. And their terms and conditions say that you're not allowed to say anything that doesn't agree with the government. Matt Taibbi said that it's not completely confirmed, but that it seems like they've seen mention in some of the Twitter files documents that the government agencies like the Department of Homeland Security may have played a role in telling these social media companies how to structure their terms and conditions. So there's a lot more that will come out from all of these, spin off revelations that will come off of the Twitter files that we can gain information about these other organizations. And yeah, it's a complete, it's just another example of what you said before: complete and total disdain and disrespect for the notion of freedom of speech.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna show you guys something else that's crazy. Here's the if you guys want to, like, Nick, what the fuck you was talking about earlier? This is a tweet from Glenn Greenwald, and I'm like, I was just now like, this is something that have been under my radar. I'll read this tweet. There's a 4-year-old girl in rural Arkansas. The girl is aware that her father is Hunter Biden and that her paternal grandfather is the president of the United States. She speaks about both of them often, but she has not met them. So I'm like, wait, what? Glenn Greenwald chimes in. He said, politics aside, Joe Biden's refusal to have anything to do with his granddaughter and his demands that everyone who work in the White House avoid any mention of her is absolutely repellent. Which is true. Like, if you want people that say, yeah, Nick, I hear what you say on politics stuff, they're similar. But Trump is morally evil. And I mentioned it, and this is my reply to Glenn. Can you imagine that was Trump? And I know there's a lot of family drama around Trump, but there's a granddaughter with Biden, like, no one fucking talks about her, never mentioned in the media. They obey, the White House team obey, and this is abhorrent because it's politically damaging to the Bidens, right? So then apparently there was a parody account of this granddaughter, and then it got taken off in less than 12 hours. So they saw that parody account, and the Biden administration said, hell no. That's our red line. You take that fucking account off right now.
And this is just very recently, right?
Yeah, this is according to the ruling. It was from 2021 that these requests was going on. Go ahead.
I was just going to bring up the point. That example aside, that seems like it was before Elon Musk took over Twitter, but Elon Musk has exhibited an identical disregard for free speech, and he was trying to play up that he was a defender of free speech so that more people would join his platform and make him money. He can profit off of that image of himself. But yeah, he's anything but. He's making money. He has constructed an image of himself that a lot of people bought into because they don't have a part in a broader people's movement that would give them confidence in their own activities. They have to, unplug and put their weird projections and hopes into billionaires and politicians.
Absolutely. Now I'm gonna show you guys this. And I'm loving the revelations that's coming from right wingers and capitalist sympathizers and workers who think they're capitalists, right? I think this guy is capitalist, Wall Street Silver, to be fair, probably a rich guy. They're starting to realize that the Marxists was correct, that the West is not as great as they thought it was. Now, they won't ever say it like that. They got to reconcile this shit somehow. So one way they reconcile this is they come up with absurd, ridiculous theories like Emmanuel Macron, Joe Biden controlled by a communist cabal. They're actually socialists and communists. They're globalists. No. It's capitalism. This will always be the end result of capitalism. Capitalism leads to authoritarianism because this will happen when you get a concentrated amount of power to the people who wields capital. It's this kind of corruption. The capitalists then pick their leaders, and the leaders do whatever the capitalists want. So that's why I always find it hilarious when people make all these excuses on why the West is not exactly what they thought growing up, right? So, and that's why I show a lot of these right-wing tweets, because this is a very right-wing guy. Okay, man, tweeting about these Western stories, but his analysis is completely different. According to him, it's because of the woke left socialist mob that destroyed the West, which is absurd. No, it's the capitalists. Cope. Okay? Let me read the tweet. The National Assembly in France adopted Article 3 of the Justice Bill, which authorizes the authorities to remotely activate the cameras and microphones of telephones or other connected devices without the knowledge of persons concerned. 80 votes for, 24 votes against. What are rights that are temporary and easily taken away? So now the government had the right to hijack your phone. These are the Western values that you guys cherish. Now, once again, I'm interested in seeing how these guys cope with this, because these people who love the West, the Western chauvinists, right? How they cope with the West falling apart. The West is in shambles. Late-stage capitalism is here, as predicted. The rise of police states, the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of tech authoritarianism, the coordination between big tech and government. You got a lot of conservatives that's upset because of the power of big tech. You guys see that, right? I imagine that. Like, you see Matt Gaetz, you will see like the Steven Crowders and many of those people. They will consider themselves edgy because they talk about the big tech company. Oh, look, I'm a populist because I talk about big tech companies. Who are big tech companies? It's a collection of capitalists accumulating power the way capitalists do in this society. Correct? So how are you guys blaming on socialism? Why are your eye off the mark and you guys scared about communism? That should be the last thing you guys are worried about right now. But go ahead, Andrew, if you want to chime in.
Well, no, this is just another example of what you were saying before, with even the same wording. The control over language and therefore people's thought processes is so strong that people will use authoritarianism only to describe other countries. We have 100 years plus of describing any socialist country as authoritarianism to make those synonyms in people's brains. And then they have to come up with, because they can't get outside of this propaganda that they've heard, they will just say, oh, now there's authoritarianism coming here because it's what I've been told is authoritarianism. They have no ability to think critically about it because they've been robbed of the true meaning of language. And this video, I thought it was relevant. It's showing how iPhones take an infrared photo roughly every 5 seconds. There's 3 or so infrared cameras. Really, any phone
there's another one.
Any phone that does facial recognition has this technology. And so what the French are doing here is they are tapping into this technology that already exists, that they most likely coordinated with large tech companies to instruct them to put into their phones so that it could be used as a resource for state repression. So they're just tapping into this technology that has already been made available to them in France. And the fact that they are officiating it is really just to give a legal justification for breaking the law and terrible surveillance behavior they were doing in the past. They're just normalizing it now and saying, okay, now it's legal for us to use this tool we created to oppress the populations.
Yeah, well said. I think because I want to keep this one for about an hour. I don't want to keep it too long tonight, Andrew. I think we'll wrap there. I'm trying to see if I can find the fundraiser we have. I want to share that. But any last thoughts? Anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Andrew?
Yeah, I won't take very long, but I'm hoping that in the next few weeks we'll have time and we can bring on Ernesto Vigil to talk with you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he is a Chicano activist in his 70s who has been very involved in people's struggles for justice for decades and decades now. And so just so people, if you want to have some context to what he's up to, he's written a book called The Crusade for Justice, Chicano Militancy and the Government's War on Dissent. He's done an enormous amount of research based off of his own experiences in these movements and really compiled enormous amounts of resources of dirt on the FBI and how they are constantly spending their resources, wasting your money to attack you, to attack people's movements. And he recommended a 4-part series for people who want to learn, just so they'll have like background info. It's called Chicano with an exclamation point. There's 4 different ones you can find on YouTube, and there's one that is good to start with called Quest for a Homeland. But I just wanted to put it on people's radars because I'm hoping we'll be able to talk with him soon, and he has a lot of information to share about, tactics the FBI uses still. COINTELPRO didn't go away. They just stamped a different name on the COINTELPRO program that they used to dismantle the Black Panthers and attack the American Indian movement, etc. So I just wanted to share that real quick before we wrap up. But yeah, thanks for having me on again, Nick.
Yeah, it's always great to have you on. You guys definitely will see more of Andrew. Aaron Good is scheduled for next Nick at Night on Wednesday, so got a lot of great guests that will be joining us. And even though we have a great time laughing, raging in the empire, make sure that you guys try to get involved locally, donate to local mutual aid. If you're too busy, if you're a class trader, play your role as well. If you're busy working 50, 60 hours a week, you got kids you're watching, but you're doing well for yourself, help fund the movement, fund some people who need it. And that's what I want the message of Airbnb at the end of the day. And we talk about the issues, so you guys realize that these politicians I want you guys to realize that two-party system, there's no route through the two-party system. There is irredeemably corrupt. No one's going to be here to save us except us coming together as community and easing each other's suffering as we prepare for the revolution. That will allow what the professional managerial class forget. The people who are comfortable, they're not worried about it right now. We advocate for a community. We advocate for changing the culture. We advocate for mutual aid because we need to survive right now. We need to survive right now. And we need to develop anti-capitalist, anti-individualistic communities to help take care of ourselves as we transition late-state capitalism, as we continue to fight for the betterment of our people. So hope you guys get involved. And that's the main reason why RBN exists, so you guys can get motivated to get involved. So much. Thank everybody for watching. Make sure you guys support the Patreon because that's how we pay Aaron. We take it very seriously to pay A1 the fair labor value. Aaron helps us out a lot because I'm not good at making thumbnails that you guys see from early RBN days. So I don't want her just to help us like for free. That's not what we're about. We socialists. We want to pay people their value, and we do that. Do the value we get through the channel. We're not made of money, so that's why we make the pitch, because we want to take care of Aaron. I want to take care of the people who help RBN grow. You know what I mean? That's something I can't. We haven't made money here. I don't like my people not making money when they help us out. So that's why I make the pitch for that. So thank you guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, and I think we have Sabby and JB tomorrow as well. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Have a good one.